and consider that surrender is a biblical invitation. It is not something to make you feel good. It's not like one of those sticky words that's like, oh, surrender. It's not for the weak of heart. It's for those of heart, connected to the very will of God, the heart of God. And it is necessary in order to resist the devil. I would like to propose that if you are just resisting, you are in willpower mode, and you are forgetting that the ability to resist the devil doesn't come from your own strength. It doesn't come from your own willpower. It doesn't come from your own ability. And I would like to propose it's a surrendered heart that is able to resist the devil. Welcome to Free to Dream podcast. Join me as we dive into what truly means to dream with God as we create uninhibitedly and live unapologetically. Are you free? This is the Free to Dream podcast. Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Free to Dream podcast. My name is JG, and we are here just helping you stay free. You know, someone's got to do it. Why not me? I hope you're having an awesome day. And of course, I want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, so you get all the updates and alerts for amazing podcast episodes just like this that are here designed to help you, hold the line. Do something cool for God, dream bold, live big, pass it on and tell the world. That's what we're doing today. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about the art of surrender. Oh man, if you even clicked on this episode, seeing that title, you are ready. Because for me, had I seen that title, I'd have been like, surrenders for the birds, like only the weak people surrender. So if you are watching today on YouTube, or you happen to just be listening because you're a little bit curious, or you're like all about it, or the only reason you're listening is because you're like, I will never do that, and I just need something else to laugh at, I'm just really glad that you're here. Because the truth be told, surrender is an art. And how many of you know that art is in the eye of the beholder? But even as I say that word, surrender, what does that mean to you? I mean, maybe push pause, because all the experts tell me I'm not supposed to pause longer than 4 seconds for just this awkward silence. And so push pause and ask yourself, what does surrender mean to me? Well, here's my hope for you today, is that you don't just Google what is surrender, that you don't just make up your own definition, that you actually lean in and use the Word of God to not only redefine, but to define every word, right? Because I think what can happen is that we live in an information age where we rely heavily upon the videos, Google systems around us to define what is true and what is not true. Point in case, I'm talking with my son in the car yesterday. He's 10, and he is on this journey to become fit and fabulous. And he is doing parkour and really wanting to level up. And so it's really been actually cool to see him begin these daily fitness routines and pushing himself in new ways and holding a plank longer and doing another pull-up and another push-up. And it's really cool. And so yesterday we were in the car, and he says, Mom, so I've made a decision. And I'm like, well, what's that? Right? This is after, by the way, this child has already decided to do 30 days without sugar. And he says, I am no longer going to eat bananas. And I was like, well, why? And he goes, because they give you saggy skin. I was like, what? I was like, that was not the answer I thought you were going to give me. Saggy skin. I was like, where did you hear that? He said, YouTube. I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, when were you watching YouTube? He goes, well, when I was listening to the sermon last night as I fall asleep, which mom win. My kids love to listen to Steve Furtick or Dream Church, Pastor JG. They love to listen to one of those two as they fall asleep. And he said it was an ad. I was like, oh my gosh, we need to talk to Steve Furtick and tell him to stop playing ads like that. If you can choose your ad, not about floppy skin caused by bananas. Point in case, just because we see an ad that tells us bananas give us saggy skin doesn't actually mean that's true, right? So I said to Malachi, well, you should probably do some further research. He goes, well, I did. I listened to that ad, and And I said, well, what is an ad? And he goes, I don't know what that means. I said, it's marketing. And he goes, what, is all marketing lie? I go, well, it doesn't mean that all marketing is true. Come on. So what is that to say? We are here to talk about the art of surrender. And the reason we're going to talk about the art of surrender is because truly, if left to our own demise or a Pinterest board or a Google search, we oftentimes start to think that surrender is a weak thing, that surrender is a bad thing, that it means we're giving up, right? Or oftentimes we find ourselves literally surrendering to the wrong thing. You're like, I do not surrender to the wrong thing, JG. You must be talking to a different clientele. Okay. How many of us have made decisions in fear? How many of us have made decisions because of depression? How many of us have felt anxiety? How many of us, okay, that would mean you have surrendered to fear, depression, and anxiety. We all have. We just need to be aware of it when we understand what that word means. So we're going to do that today. We are going to do that today. Here's one of my favorite quotes about surrender. It's by Vince Lombardi, actually. He says, the harder you work, the harder it is to surrender. The harder you work, the harder it is to surrender. I think right out of the gate, that tells us why surrender can be a very challenging thing in today's age, because we live in a world that tells us to do one more, give it all you got, rise and grind, show no sign of weakness, and we push ourselves to the limits. Now, you guys know I like one more push-up. You know that I love finding the burn and lifting till failure and all of those things. And they're great until they're not. They're great until they become the motivation in which we live our lives in such a way that the harder we work, the less we're surrendering. And then we take on this false responsibility that there is a God and we must be him, right? And so we are pushing our agendas, we're pushing our ideas, we're pushing our notions. And at some level, what's happening is we are overlooking what the Bible tells us about this word, giving us instruction on how to live our lives. So let's go there, shall we? So ultimately, what do I want you to do? First and foremost, I want you to put the idea of what you think surrender is, even if you're an expert in the field. I just want you to like put it over there for just a hot minute so we can relearn what it actually means. Now, let's talk about what does, for the sake of the exercise, if you were to Google surrender, what does it mean? It means cease resistance to an enemy or opponent and submit to their authority. Great. Okay, awesome. That's to give over to the power, control, or possession of another, especially by force. To give oneself over to something is what surrender means. All right. Immediately, that brings up verses for me, that, and we hear it all the time about feeling like we might just be in constant attack by the enemy. Does anyone ever, maybe you are that person, or you're friends with that person who is in constant attack? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying, I am surely not one to under spiritualize things, because we are spiritual beings having a physical existence, but at the core, we're spiritual beings. Now, I don't want to under spiritualize anything, because everything is spiritual, but I also don't want to over spiritualize it. When you get a flat tire and you're like, it's the enemy, or your pencil breaks and you're like, the enemy, or someone looks at you wrong, you're like, the enemy. Now, I'm not suggesting that the enemy isn't out to rob, steal, and destroy your pencils in your tires and the way that your neighbor looks at you. However, right, there's those people that are just like under attacks. But the truth is, how many of you have also been in seasons where it's like hit after hit after hit after hit, right? You could take a couple of steps forward and then immediately a couple of steps back. Or, I even remember for my husband and I, last year, we had the most incredible opportunity for me to be ordained, for my family to sit underneath that covering. And I kid you not, but it was like the minute the oil hit my head, it was like a spiritual attack on all levels. And so why I'm drawing our awareness here is because we don't want to over spiritualize it, but we don't want to under spiritualize it. But the reality is there are attacks. And so what happens is we immediately shoot to resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Resist the devil, right? We start to see his attacks and we're like, oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. You're like, ooh, did she just say hell no on a podcast? Yeah, but I need to tell you something. It's important where you put a comma, because it's not just hell no with an exclamation. It's hell, comma, no. You can quote me on that. Hashtag hell, comma. No. But we love that. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. He will literally run from you. But how many of you feel like sometimes that the more that you tell the enemy to flee, the more he's like running at you? You're like, I got to stop doing this. Why do you keep running towards me? Okay. I mean, the truth is Satan is real. His attacks are real, but we can't forget that God is greater. Now, here's the problem I want to draw our attention to is the moment that we start to feel the impact of the attacks, it's easy over time, or depending upon how spiritually aware we are, is to start going, why, God? Why are you allowing this to happen? Where are you in all of this? And because the attacks are so real or feel so heavy, we lower our expectations around the power of God to match the repercussions of the ripple of the fear, of the pain, of the attacks that we're receiving. It's a really complicated way of saying. It's almost like we take the power of God and we minimize it because the impacts of the attacks of the enemy are so great. And now all of a sudden, if we're not careful, the attacks are bigger than God. And so what we start to do is we actually start to resist God. And it's almost like we are surrendering to the enemy's attacks. Do you want to come sit with me, Zion? You come sit. Okay. And here's what I want to draw some attention to today is that we have flip-flopped our hearts in this. Okay, I'm going to walk you through this process. We're resisting the enemy. We're resisting the enemy. We're resisting the enemy. And then what happens is, given enough attacks or big enough blows, all of a sudden, subtly but surely, we're like, where are you, God? Where are you, God? Where are you, God? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me again? Why? I didn't think it was going to happen like this. And all of a sudden, we start paying more attention, putting more emphasis on the problem as opposed to the promise. And now, subconsciously, I am resisting what God is wanting to do, his will, his way, his time, because it's not matching mine. And I am surrendering to the enemy. Okay, so there's so many things that have happened here. And this one verse helps us identify it. It's because I would like to propose that verse that we so wholeheartedly love in James 4:7, resist the devil and he will flee from you, is because we left the first part out. The first part of this verse says, surrender to God, resist the devil and he will flee from you. Light bulb moment, mic drop, change your life, revolutionize the way that you think, and consider that surrender is a biblical invitation. It is not something to make you feel good. It's not like one of those sticky words that's like, oh, surrender. It's not for the weak of heart. It's for those of heart connected to the very will of God, the heart of God. And it is necessary in order to resist the devil. I would like to propose that if you are just resisting, you are in willpower mode and you are forgetting that the ability to resist the devil doesn't come from your own strength. It doesn't come from your own willpower. It doesn't come from your own ability. And I would like to propose it's a surrendered heart that is able to resist the devil. But here we are, only resisting the devil, now on empty, seeing his attacks, feeling overwhelmed, not surrendering. And in fact, now we're surrendering to the enemy. We're surrendering to the fear. We're surrendering to the addiction. Oh, Zion needs me to wipe him. Hold, please. Hey there, Free to Dream podcast listeners, JG here. I wanted to acknowledge that you are here because you want to live free and dream bold. And I guess I wanted to ask you, did you know that I wrote a book, Dream I Dare You? It's not like any other dreaming book out there. It's not a conference or a vision board session that's going to make you feel good. It's a wake-up call that's going to help you bridge the gap. What's the gap, you ask? It's the space between where you are and where you want to be. That gap between your dreams and reality, between that prophetic word and where you're standing today. That gap. This framework has already transformed thousands of lives, and today could be your day to take that leap. So let's bridge the gap together. Click on the link in the show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube, that QR code right there. Grab your copy today. I dare you. Okay, you gotta love those potty breaks. Okay, so here we are. And I would like to propose God's divine framework. First, we surrender, then we resist. Now, this part gets good because the Bible says surrender to God. The Bible uses the word. That would also suggest that we should know what the word is. So we are surrendering with the right heart and in the right way. So when we go back to that word, surrender, right? Google could define it one way, but what does the Bible say about surrender? It says when we surrender our lives to Jesus, we're committing to follow him and we're letting him lead. When you really look at what yield means biblically, it uses the word did I just I just gave it to you. When you look at what the word surrender means biblically, it's to yield. Okay, now we're getting even the thing under the thing. You guys know I love this. I like going even deeper. We'll even call this the thing above the thing. So here God is saying, surrender to me. Surrender to me. Okay, now what does that word mean? It means that we're committing our lives to him and we are going to follow him wholeheartedly, but it gives us this invitation around the word yield. Now, yield means, here's what, I mean, this is what this word, I love what this word means. The best definition is to produce as land, stock, or funds, to give in return for labor or as a profit. It's to produce in general. But it also means it's a word that describes the act of producing or giving forth, right? So when we think about yield, we oftentimes continue to see it as a word that means to give over the power to, which is not incorrect. So when we're invited into this word of surrender and yield to God, it doesn't mean giving up, it means giving in. Yielding means my ability to give in to the will of God, his will, his way, his time, taking everything I am to him and going, I will give into you because even though maybe I don't like this, even though maybe this isn't meeting my expectations or this wasn't the plan that I had, I'm going to give this to you. Okay. That's the first part of what yield is. But then what we start to realize when we look at what yielding means is a yield means it's producing a crop, that there's almost a result of a harvest of could it be that when I give my stuff to God, that his stuff that he wants to give back is even greater? Could it be that when I give him my will and he gives me his will, it would blow my mind? Could it be that when I give him my way, that he gives me his way and that his word promises it's going to be even bigger, better than I could ever imagine? We talked about this in the last podcast, right? That he would exceed our expectations because that's who he is. So yielding is not only just me giving in to him, it's actually seeing this production of fruit because of the sacrifice that I give, right? So if we continue on in his word and we start to look at, well, what else does yield mean? Well, we know that yield is a word that also means abide. So there is a close similarity to surrender and yield and abide. Hey, Ziza, you can't push on that, baby. You can't let go, please. Thank you. All right, so what is abide? Abide. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's go straight to you guys. You already know. You know exactly where I'm going. John 15:7. Okay, it says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you. Okay, so let's just check this out. When we look at this word abide, it means accept or act in accordance with. Oh my goodness. It means to remain in the same place or position over a period of time. It means to reside, to stay, to live, and to dwell. It's a fixed state. This doesn't mean that my surrender or my yield or even my abiding with God is a moment in time. It's not my quiet time. It's not my worship time. It's not even in just my 15-minute prayer closet time. It's a fixed state. So when John 15:7 is saying, abide in me as I abide in you, that's actually to dwell in me, to live in me. This isn't a moment. This is a lifestyle. And it goes back to, I think if we're not careful, we get too much into this push pull and we're like, okay, God, I'm gonna pray with you in the morning and I'm gonna come back in the evening, or I'm gonna do it on a Sunday. I'm gonna come back to you next Sunday. And we wonder why we just feel perpetually drained. I'd like to propose this because we have not learned or received the grace of abiding with him. We actually don't see it as a lifestyle. But we could, better said, if we're reading this verse out of John 15:7, if you live in me and my words live in you, if you dwell in me and my words dwell in you, if you stay fixed in me and my words stay fixed in you. When was the last time we thought of it that way? Right? Now it makes sense when it says surrender to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. The reason that the enemy is going to flee from you is not because he's afraid of you, he's afraid of God in you. So now when it comes time to resisting, it's a posture of, oh, I'm with him, God, and I'm going to let him deal with you, Satan. I'm actually going to let you, I'm going to let the God of the universe put you in place and do with you what he already needs to do, so I don't have to kill myself, strain myself, perfect myself, right? I don't have to do it. It's God in who lives in me and I live in him, abiding, dwelling, staying fixed. That's the life that experiences the abundance of heaven's realities, to the point that I don't drain myself resisting the enemy, because instead of living my victory by just fighting the enemy, my victory is found in the surrender to God. Okay, that is a good word. Did you hear what I just said? I said, your victory is found in surrender. Now, if you really learn how to do this as a lifestyle, I would like to propose that everything you're wanting is on the other side of doing it. If we look at this full, I don't know, 6, 8, we'll even call 10 verses in scriptures of John 15. I'm going to read them because I think it's important. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. This goes back to the concept of yielding. Yielding isn't just giving in to God and his will and his way and his time. It's the production of fruit that a life lived in him produces. And anything that isn't producing the fruit that exemplifies who he is, he's got to prune. It's called refiner's fire. It's called that. Could it be that every attack that even the enemy is throwing at you isn't just about the attack? It's about the opportunity for God to draw you in, him being the vine, you being his branches, refining you, saying, hey, the enemy wants to take you out here, but draw closer to me and let me make you more like me. What if every time the attack hits, instead of shooting straight to resist the enemy, what if you fall back into the arms of a loving Father and you go, you do you. God, make my heart more like you. Make my mind more like you. I give you my anxiety, my depression, my ego, my pride, my fear. Make me more like you. What if the attacks of the enemy weren't causing you to push harder, but were causing you to surrender more, yield more, abide like your life depends on it? That's the point. The enemy just didn't want you to know that. Right? Because then it says on verse 3, already you are clean because of the word that I've spoken to you. Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me, stay fixed in me, live in me, dwell in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. Isn't that interesting? The minute that we shoot into willpower and start doing everything on our own, we're actually given the analogy. It's like a tree, a branch that's disconnected, that does fine for a hot minute, right? Like that tree looks good. You cut a flower out of the ground and that thing is solid for a day or two or even a week. Great, good on you. And then what happens? We start to lose steam. It's not sustainable. right? We shift into willpower. Now we're exhausted and we wonder why. I would like to propose that your levels of exhaustion are because you've disconnected from God, expecting the same results. And he's ultimately making this analogy of like, hey, like apart from me, you can do nothing. And now you're going to be in the fire and you're going to get burned up, as opposed to being in me and letting my refiner's fire purify you, connected to me. Check it out. This is the verses that we love. So if you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. This verse, this is our verse, church, forever, right? But here's the problem is most of us, we shoot for, okay, ask whatever we want in the Lord and he's going to give it to us. And I've been asking and he's not giving, and I've been asking and he's not been giving. Here is the only way that we know what we're asking for is connected to the heart of God, is if we're abiding with him. Do you notice that that verse isn't just go ask whatever you want? How many of you, like Garth Brooks, if you're being honest, you're like, thank God for unanswered prayers. Thank God that he has not answered every single prayer that I have prayed. How many of you have prayed prayers out of fear, have dreamed dreams out of insecurity, have asked for God for things that you're like, oh man, I don't actually think that that was aligned with his will and his way. That would not make you crazy. It'd make you human, misaligned, disconnected, not abiding in him, and striving to be more, have more, look like you're doing more. And that again doesn't make you crazy. It just means you're disconnected from and not fixed in, abiding in, yielded to, surrendered to God. So here, this verse blows our mind and says, look, if you can actually see yourself as a branch that can do nothing outside of being connected to God, this is a relationship. This is not religion. This is not about perfection. This is about proximity, relationship, right? When that happens, now, if I'm dwelling in, living in, abiding in, yielded to, surrendered to God, my thoughts are his thoughts. My heart is like his heart. My heart beats to the rhythm of heaven. My mind thinks like how God thinks. I want what he wants, which is why the byproduct of abiding is ask anything and it will be given to you. Why? Because my asks are his asks. My desires are his desires. My dreams are his dreams. And so, of course, what would I say to you today? So if you've been asking and asking and asking and not receiving and not receiving and not receiving, I think the answer is abide. Maybe you're asking for the wrong things. Maybe you are just asking for what you want and you're not asking for his heart. Maybe you're asking for your will and not asking for his. Maybe you're asking for him to meet you where you are instead of going and meeting him where he is. Maybe your heart needs to be closer to his, to taste and to see that he is good and to understand what he is doing. And even if that means that you got to yield and to surrender, meaning that you give in, it's what you got to do. And it's from this place that you learn that his will is always better. His way is always mightier. His thoughts are always higher. And from that place of abiding and proximity with him and connection to him, he blows your mind. He gets after your heart. You start asking for the things that he wants. You start dreaming what he's dreaming, right? And now all of a sudden he's saying, and by the way, my Father is glorified and you bear much fruit and you prove to be my disciples. There it is, ladies and gentlemen, right here, the most climactic part of this whole entire thing, which is now when your life is a fulfillment of the dreams that God's given you, it glorifies him. Oh, the only thing that I've been trying to prove for, I don't know, the last 7 years, 365 days times 7 times thousands of words that I've written and all, you're like listening to this podcast, you're the first time, you're like, what are you talking about? Oh my gosh. For 7 years, I've been trying to tell the church that fundamentally, when we understand what it means to dream with God, that we will play a role in bringing heaven to earth. Boom, here it is. Now, when my life is a life that reflects the dreams of heaven, reality of those made manifest, displayed, shown, it glorifies God and it proves that I'm one of his disciples. And so when someone says, that looked a little impossible, how did that dream come true? Tell me more about that. We are able to invite them into the process of God, not just the victory of God, but the process, which we're able to say that was God. Like, but I agreed with him. He had my amen. He had my yes. So I surrendered to him. I learned that that surrender required me to yield to him. That yielding wasn't only just me leaning in and giving into him, but that it was producing fruit because of him. And that fruit that I'm able to produce because of him is because of the abiding relationship that I learned to have with him, meaning that I actually decided to have a lifestyle with the Lord. Not 5 minutes in the morning, not just at church, but like in the bathroom, and when I'm talking to friends, and when I'm doing my hair, and in the midst of the storm, and when I'm in my car, and even if I'm upset, that I just decided to see myself as the branch to his vine to my branch. And I just started to live like I was abiding in him as a lifestyle, and it changed everything. That is what it looks like to be his disciple. Now, does that mean it's going to be perfect? No. Nowhere in this verse does it say, oh, by the way, do it perfectly. In fact, even in verse 9, it goes on to say, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. That means that the abiding presence is not of shame or perfection or fear. It's in love. That means it shifts my mode operandi, my MO, to be love. Now I live from love. I live from my dependency in the Lord. That means, again, my greatest analogy for free to dream is the level of your dreaming is dependent upon the level of your freedom. But the level of your freedom is dependent upon the levels of dependency that you have in the Lord. So when you now are connected to truly his love, it does something within you that creates a dependency in him, 24/7 dependency. That dependency then creates the ability to walk in total freedom with him. And it's my freedom in the Lord that allows me to dream bold and live big because of him, because I actually became this verse. Then it says in verse 10, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. I'd like to propose that a life that's living in joy is very aware of the presence of God. Joy doesn't come from external circumstances. This is not happiness. Joy is an internal infilling of the Holy Spirit. And when we are so connected in love to him, we actually walk in joy. In his spirit, there is the fullness of joy, and our lives become a reflection of joy because we are so acutely aware of his presence. What does that mean? It actually means that right now, if you check in with your joy meter, like if we had a joy meter, you have one, right? If I had a joy meter, if it's on empty, it's not because I don't have something. It's that I'm not connected to someone. It means that I'm not aware of the presence of God. And all I have to do then is to be able to follow this plan again, to go back, I need to surrender to God, yield to him, abide in him, accept his love, and receive fullness of joy. Our lives should be marked by joy. Our lives should be marked by joy. Our lives should be marked by love. Our lives should be marked by an abiding relationship with God. Our lives should be marked by surrender. Now, the art of surrender, because art is in the eye of the beholder. So here's what we got to do. We got to be okay with the awkward on the way to awesome, the messy in the middle. It's the art of surrender. That doesn't always mean we're going to get it right. This isn't about getting it right. This is about running directly to the Father. This is about knowing how to run to him in all of it, right? Like, I feel like that changed my life. Like I'm a runner, I'm a mover, I'm a shaker. And I finally decided that instead of running from God in my shame or mistakes, instead of just like, okay, yeah, saying sorry, right, and being forgiven, I learned that being a child of God means I get to run, like I have the confidence to run towards him. And so the art of surrender is being okay with taking this kind of like whiteboard and this color of paint and just allowing God to make something beautiful even with our mess, to make something awesome even with the awkward. And so today, where I want you to hold the line is no longer just to resist the attacks, but to surrender to God. I don't want you to surrender to the fear. I don't want you to surrender to the addiction. I don't want you to surrender to anything but God. To learn how to yield to Him, to give in to Him, and then allow Him to produce in you an incredible heart, and ultimately His abiding presence in you that will ultimately glorify Him through you. So today I want you to consider, where in your life have you been resisting what God wants to do and surrendering to the enemy? We got to flip the switch. We got to flip that. Someone say, flip it good. Where are there areas of fear, doubt, and frustration that have taken over? And for just a moment, you got to lay those down at the feet of God, and you got to surrender those. It starts there. Surrender to Him, all of it, everything, your fears, your dreams, your hopes, your desires, your pain. We need to surrender that to God. Then I want you to consider, what are the things that you need to give in to Him, right? To be able to just to fully trust Him. I want to encourage you to spend some time just in His presence today, available to Him, letting Him lead you and guide you, and letting this place of surrender ultimately allow Him to be the defender and the strong tower that He is. And from that overflow, that you start resisting the devil, that you remind yourself of who you are because of whose you are, and that you allow Him to do what only He can do in and through your life. Isn't that right, Z-Man? That's right, Z-Man. We're so glad you joined us for the podcast today. Is there any last words you have? Yeah. How many more minutes? I think the time is done, friends. The time is done. Zion's hungry. We're going to wish you a great day. You come say goodbye to everybody? Say friends.
Friends,
Say dream on.
dream on,
Say dream bold.
dream bold,
Live big.
live big.
That's right. Until next time, dreamers, we hope you have an awesome day surrendering to God and resisting the devil. Until next time.